Maria Elena Incapié, a Latina woman with short-length brown hair, wearing a red blouse, sits for a video conversation with Hillary Pennington, a white woman with short blonde hair, wearing a floral shirt. On-screen text, Maria Elena Incapié, Executive Director, National Immigration Law Center.
One of the lessons that I think we've learned from the pandemic is how interdependent we all are. Here in the US, immigrants are part of that essential workforce that we really believe need to be recognized by the law as well. Our ability to eventually recover is going to depend on all of us recovering.
On-screen graphic, social justice leaders on what matters, Hillary Pennington with Maria Elena Incapié. On-screen text, Hillary Pennington, Executive Vice President of Programs, Ford Foundation.
I am speaking with Maria Elena Incapié, the Executive Director of the National Immigration Law Center, the nation's leading organization dedicated to defending and advancing the rights of low-income immigrants in the U.S. As an immigrant from Colombia, Maria Elena brings her lived experience to her work, as well as outstanding legal and strategic expertise and leadership. And I'm really, really eager to speak with you, Maria Elena.
Great. Thank you, Hillary. Thank you so much for this invitation.
Can you remind us what the goal of systemic immigration reform actually is?
I think your question is really important because immigration, especially in these last 4 years, has been used as a weapon to divide our country. When in fact, we are a nation of indigenous people, right? So if you take the Native Americans and then you take people who are descendants of African slaves, everyone else is a descendant of an immigrant. One of the lessons learned of the last 20, 25 years is that we actually need to help the country understand that immigrants are a valued political constituency, that everyone has that story, someone in their either their own story or their family's story, their family's life, or a loved one who has an immigrant background. It's not that immigrants are a problem that need to be solved, but instead that we need to be recognized for our humanity.
Yes, 100%. Let's come back to what might be the parameters of a better way of actually welcoming and supporting people who do immigrate here. Because what you just said made me think even our policy prioritizing dreamers as sympathetic cases is in some ways a trade-off, a decision to start that may be strategic, may be necessary, but can also be problematic. Absolutely. So I would love to hear your reflections on that.
Yeah, that's such an important question, Hillary, because in fact, when we look at the moment that we're living in, right, like so much of that is about redefining who we are as America and who we are becoming as a nation, and understanding that at the end of the day, we are all human beings. And one of the lessons that I think we've learned from the pandemic is how interdependent we all are. Our ability to eventually recover is going to depend on all of us recovering. Here in the US, immigrants are part of that essential workforce that we really believe need to be recognized by the law as well. And so, I think the narrative change and the cultural change is going to be critical as a strategy for us to actually get to a place where all immigrants have an opportunity to really thrive in this nation.
You called out the importance of recognizing that people who are immigrants are political constituencies. And I think, people tend to oversimplify differences within the immigrant community itself, assuming all immigrants hold similar political views or should hold similar political views, or that their political views are dominated by one dimension of their identity, their status as immigrants. Yeah. What does this go wrong? And how do you see that playing out right now?
Yeah, people are like, oh, the Latino vote. It's like, no, it's not monolithic, right? We've got many countries represented, many like anyone else, immigrants are also diverse. And, one of the things that's really interesting, Hillary, is that unfortunately for far too long, immigration has been equated with Latinos, when in fact, Latinos have many other interests and needs besides immigration. There is socioeconomic diversity, there is gender identity diversity, there is social conservatism among a lot of immigrants as well. And what's interesting that I think that we're at a moment in our country where, as we look at finally, hopefully getting to a place where we do recognize immigrants as a political constituency, there's going to need to be some very hard work in organizing and advocacy done. So there's an opportunity for us to ensure that immigrants are seen as a political constituency and for the different parties, whether it's at the state level, at the federal level, to fight for that vote, right? To actually earn the vote of future American citizens as well.
So many people are outraged that the Trump administration separated migrant children from their families at the border. But even before Trump, Democratic presidents were also ramping up raids and deportations. What does it mean to treat people we turn away with dignity and respect?
We need immigration reforms, and I would argue that we need them from the ground up, right? We need state and local policies that actually help improve the lives of low-income immigrants, and that's access to healthcare, access to education, workers' rights, et cetera, access to driver's licenses. It is just incredible that a country that so relies on immigrants for a whole host of reasons has allowed, right? And I would say that this is a failure in leadership at the congressional level, has allowed for such a large percentage of our society to be not only disenfranchised, but on the margins of the law. And so we absolutely need to reform our laws. And, first and foremost, we need a legalization path, a path to citizenship for the, close to 11 million members of our communities, right? The majority of undocumented immigrants in this country have been here for over a decade, right? They have US citizen children. They are small business owners. They are homeowners. They pay taxes. There's myth of why don't people get in line? Well, there is no line to get into, right? We can't be a country of laws and not have the legal channels for people to be able to become a citizen. Second is we need to make sure that we restore due process to our system, right? That people who are coming to the United States seeking safety, right, who are fleeing persecution, violence in their home countries, including femicide, right? So many of the women and children who are leaving the Northern Triangle, who are fleeing the Northern Triangle, in Central America, so El Salvador, Guatemala, and Honduras, they're leaving because of gender-based violence. And so we have to ensure and restore that ability, that due process right that people should apply for asylum and have immigration judges available to do that. In the United States, since the Department of Homeland Security was created since 2003, we have spent over $381 billion on interior and border enforcement, more than all federal law enforcement agencies combined. Yet we have not gotten legalization for the undocumented immigrants.
Well, these are huge issues, sort of, invisible in plain sight, visible in plain sight, but not yet something the country is really, I don't think, getting its head around. Mm-hmm. And, when you talk about, you think about the resources that we spend, and those are resources that could be spent in other ways. And this is, I think, comes back to the points you were making about COVID. What does it mean? What is safety really in a society? Other than the ability for people to live lives of dignity. You could take the money that we are putting into law enforcement in so many dimensions and invest it in a different way. So I want to really thank you for those insights, and also just, Maria Elena, how you lead. It's so important to and exhausting. But it's so important to get this country to turn the corner, because you are right. This is about all of who we all are. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Hillary. I'm so grateful for you. Thank you.
Yes, and you. Be well.
Gracias. You as well.
On-screen text. What's your take? Join the conversation. Ford Foundation logo.